Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm Chris Boyd, certified financial planner practitioner, and my office is Asset Management Resources. Our show is a financial show. We call it Something More because we like to talk about all those important dollar and cents issues, but also those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Thanks for being with us. I'm joined by Scott Birmingham, Asset Management Resources lead financial planner. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Glad to be here.
All right. We have a lot to talk about today, and I don't know where you want to begin, but I've been thinking about the topic of people who retire early. In fact, so early that they may not be uh, eligible for Social Security. They may not be eligible even to take their distributions from their retirement account or take withdrawals from their retirement account. Um, Cash flow planning can be a real challenge when you're retiring early if you don't have a lot of savings, right?
Yep, and I've actually seen this come up quite a bit with people divorcing in their mid 50s, and maybe the spouse has never worked, and the bulk of the assets are in retirement plans. So definitely
Yeah.
cash flow concerns.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When it comes to people's retirement and savings generally, um, we see sometimes where people are loaded up in their retirement plans and not always a mix of some IRA, some trust or individual joint, whatever it might be,
Right.
or even some Roth IRA. And when that happens, and we see this a lot with, for example, professionals like doctors who might be worried about litigation, so they kind of have the protections of a retirement plan, and they have a lot of wealth tied into that retirement plan. But then when it comes time to retire and they look to use some of those funds, let's say they want to buy a car, you got to pay a lot of taxes every time you need to make a withdrawal to
Exactly.
make a purchase, to have an expense. I was thinking there are a lot of challenges besides the financial, and we'll talk about the financial in just a moment. But one of the issues I was thinking about with that kind of early retirement was health insurance. If you don't have an employer with a full-time job, you might not be eligible for health insurance the usual way. I was talking with a client not long ago, and they were saying, well, if we think we have to work until, 63 and a half or something, they were thinking how long before COBRA would run out, and then they could be eligible for Medicare. There might be other solutions, though, right?
I mean, those pre-Medicare numbers are really quite high.
For costs. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a friend who just took out a package, retire early package at 62, and just stunned at the coverage for him, his wife, his two kids. So he took a consulting job on the side just because he just hated paying.
I think that's a common thing. People like to have a little bit of extra income to help do that. That's one of the things that people might want to consider if they retire early is whether to, stop work entirely or whether to have some supplemental income. There are those connectors, though, in Massachusetts. I think, I don't know, is it still called Commonwealth Connect or something like that? But there are these opportunities where you can find health insurance coverage, even if you're not covered by a plan at work.
Sure, you can pick it up on your own. It is pricey, but yeah.
And there's ranges of kinds of coverage and benefits and such. What were you going to say?
I think it's healthcare.gov if you want to try to do it on your own. But yeah, you can pick and choose and skimp in the plan as much as you need to. But it's still a daunting number when you've been covered, been work for years, and all of a sudden you got to pay that extra amount you really didn't plan for.
Yeah. Do you have any sense of what that cost is?
I think for my friend who had a wife and two kids, I think it was almost $18,000 a year.
Isn't that incredible, huh?
Yeah.
There is in Massachusetts, besides the one you mentioned with the U.S. Program, in Massachusetts, there's the mahealthconnector.org. and
Okay.
that's a local version of that. So in any case, healthcare costs one of those things you got to plan for. One of the other things I worry about when people retire early is that they live a long time. I mean,
Right.
not that we want to worry about living a long time, but you can have the risk of depletion, using up those resources, and that can be problematic at times because you can, if you live a long life and say for example you retire at 55, what if you live to 95? You might be retired longer than you worked.
Right. And those extra, say, 10 years, 10 years more of spending, 10 years less of savings and compounding has a huge effect.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, well, let's talk about what you do though if you do plan to retire young. I don't know. You might have. Do you have any other of the risks that come to your mind? Those were the first couple that I was like, these are one of the challenges people have to think about how they plan for when they retire young, so to speak.
I think it's that added longevity number, that added number of extra years
Yeah.
of spending, and again, we all know what inflation can do to your
Right.
spending habits and your portfolio just over the past few years. And now you factor in an extra 10 years of that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
like you said, without that compounding, that shorter period like that, where the retirement savings, whatever your investments, don't have as long to incubate a little bit and become greater. Um, that can be material in the impact that that has.
I would think if you're motivated to retire at say 55, you're probably not the person who's going to go sit on the couch and watch Netflix. You're going to get out and spend and do and travel and see. So those
Yeah.
first years are probably going to be high in expenses.
Well, like you said with your friend who did the consulting, I think that's probably an important thing to consider. It's one thing to say, "I want to stop, get off this wheel, the hamster
Right.
wheel, and maybe out of the rat race of sorts." I'm using all these what are they vermin metaphors here, but anyway, but but then you also may want to have some continued intellectual stimulation and
Right.
interaction and financial benefit from that, potentially, whether it's part-time work or consulting services, whatever it might be. All those can be a help in the process. Well, what do you do though if that's not enough? Let's say you do have a part-time job, uh, you have ample resources by your calculation in your retirement plan, so, to meet your needs. Uh, what do you do to avoid having a penalty tax every time you want to take a withdrawal from your retirement plan?
Sure. So there's one option. It's Internal Revenue Code 72T, but essentially it is referred to as substantially equal periodic payments. And it's for folks pre 59 and a half who want to access their money but want to avoid that 10% penalty, which everybody does.
Yeah.
So the idea, it can apply to your IRA, can apply to your employer sponsored plan. So if you have 401k, uh, the caveat with the employer sponsored plan is you have to be separated from service from that job. So
Right.
take that into account. So what it is, you set it up, and essentially you have to take payments from your, say, IRA for a minimum of either, well, whichever is longer, 5 years or to age 59 and a half. So if you started at age 50, for example, uh, you have to do it 59 and a half. That's longer. If you started at age 58, you're doing it to age 63,
So at
5 year,
least at least 5 years
at least 5
or
years.
59 and a half, whichever is longer.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, please go on.
I was going to say there's three versions of calculations the IRS lets you do to determine what that payment will be. There's your required minimum distribution tables, which are pretty straightforward. You can look up.
Does
There's
it,
a new.
do you happen to know offhand, does it use the same uniform table or does it use something different when you?
I don't know. I don't know if you use uniform or single life.
So we might have to check on that if you're doing this, but know that
Yeah.
there can be different tables, and you make sure you do it the right way. And
Right.
we can always check on that if someone's looking.
So
in,
RMD is just one of them. Another one is annuitization, where there's calculation done based on your expected life expectancy,
yeah.
and then the last one is amortization. Uh,
What
which
is
one
that?
hit? The big difference between the two, I don't know where would it hit and which three would hit best based on our age. So it actually, you really have to do it, to be
Individualized
honest.
calculation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, the only one, so they usually, all the three payments are level for the 5 years except for RMD. So RMD is going to follow whether it's uniform or single life, that change in number every year. So your payment will adjust every year. So if that's important to you, maybe you focus on using the RMD table.
Yeah, and or if it's important to you not to have changing numbers, that's also
Right.
relevant to think about. But
Right.
um, one of the things that was impressed upon me when looking into this is that the IRS is very rigid about the once you start this process, you have very specific rules and very detailed requirements that it's important that you adhere to, and it's a way to avoid the 10% penalty tax, so you can withdraw. You still have income tax consequence, but you don't have that extra 10% because you're
Right.
using it as a retirement spending, resource, or your retirement income, which is what it's intended for. You just retired young, so it's doable, but there are very specific rules. Now, I had someone who was contemplating this, Scott, and I don't know if you, this is kind of something you don't run into every day, by the way. So if you're not in the situation where this applies, don't do it. You know what I mean. But I had someone who was thinking about doing the 72T approach, but they also wanted to make additional withdrawals. Do you happen to know, is that permissible or is that frowned upon?
Um, that's a good question. I know if there's any modification, I would
I
assume
would
if it
think
was
it's
on the
not allowed,
downside.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be disallowed, and then
Yeah.
it'll all be subject to the penalty tax.
It'll be retroactive and they'll put the 10% penalty on. So
All of the payments that had come out,
yeah.
so not just this year or something. Yeah,
Right.
if it was a couple years into it or something. Yeah. So I had that worry as well, and kind of suspected that might be a problem. Um, and so that's a challenge if you want that kind of um, additional access. But so what one should really think about is, can they create a number that meets their needs through one of
Right.
these calculation methods and stick with it for
Right.
the period of time? In my case, someone was 55, in my hypothetical illustration that I was suggesting, someone 55, and then, they'd have to stay with it for 5 years, either the greater of 59 and a half or 5 years. Um, but I think this person just didn't feel they had the confidence that they could stick to the number.
No. Yeah. It's got to be taken out at least annually. You're right. I mean, they allow it, they give you a way to get at it, but they make it a little difficult and rigid. So now you got to make sure you can stick with the plan and not going to alter things.
One of the things I've wondered before in dealing with this, Scott, is to the degree of rigidity about this. Like, if I take a monthly payment 1 year, does that mean I always have to take a monthly payment, or is it just that I have to do it, within the year? I take let's say the RMD amount, can I, you know what I mean? I assume it's
Yeah.
just the total amount has to be satisfied.
I
Not,
believe just that amount has to come out annually. Yeah.
yeah, it
So
doesn't
people,
necessarily matter whether it's monthly or annually from 1 year
right.
to the next, right? Yeah. Um, in any case, so 72T, substantially equal periodic payments. I always mess up what the SET
So do
stands for.
I. So do
Uh,
I.
um, but the rules are very specific, but it does represent a possible solution to those people who are retiring a little bit younger than they might have expected and can adhere to those rules. Um, well, anything else that we should be thinking about when it comes to, people who retire early? Um, what other advice would you have for them?
I mean, I think it's something you have to map out. So you look at these things, especially tax planning, year by year. So whether we need to access some money from your retirement accounts, what if we took money in a lump sum 1 year versus doing the 72T, paid your taxes, but that's all you need? Would that work out better? Maybe you could take the money, set it aside, invest it, things like that. So I don't think it's not an easy one-shot type thing. I think everybody's kind of individualized. How do we satisfy that cash flow, and how we kind of get around those rules?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think, one of the things I would say is a reminder to everyone listening. Um, if you need help in thinking through your plans, what's the right way to do this for your situation, certainly reach out to AMR. We're here for this purpose to try to be a resource. We do offer complimentary consultation where we can help people in their financial planning and see if we can be a resource to them. Um, Mapping it out, as you said, is essential. You have to really look at this, and the difference of a couple of years can make
Right.
a huge impact on how things play out. So having the right game plan can make a difference to how it all ends up. None of us knows how long we have, of course. So we're making some guesses. We don't know what's going to happen with inflation or markets and all that, but we can get a pretty accurate sense of what the probabilities of a favorable outcome are based on some assumptions. And that can be a helpful tool. Along these lines, Kathy Ingersoll is here in studio. She just reminded me not to forget. We've got our Retirement Red Zone client webinar coming up. If you're someone who's getting close to retirement, that's the topic of our next client webinar, which we do each quarter. Each quarter, we provide our clientele, and oftentimes we open it up. This one certainly is something we'd be happy to share with our listeners. We're going to basically be talking about what to do when you're getting close to retirement. What are some of the things to remember and get ready, and how to be best prepared as you get closer to retirement to be ready. So that and of course in September, when this is September 20th that we're having this webinar. We're getting into football season, so we're yeah, hard to believe, right? So the Retirement Red Zone is a good play on we're getting into that fun time of year. So in any case, if you'd like to learn more about that, you can certainly check out our website, amrfinancial.com. We do have an area where we talk about our webinars. Kathy, is that on the front page, the registration? That is on the front page of amrfinancial.com, and you can get registered. If it's something you'd like to attend, you're welcome to join us, glean a little bit of good information for your planning and your future. Scott, thanks for a little bit of help. We're going to have you back in just a little bit with our next segment when we are joined by Jeff Tamaning.
All
We'll be
right.
talking about another on our next episode, next segment. We're going to be talking with you both about divorce issues and how to be ready if you're going through the prospects of divorce. What are some of the things to be doing? So join us for that. And until next time, keep striving for something more.